info in there. So we are recording this evening's presentation. When we share it, we'll only share speaker view. So not to worry about sharing your video cameras. And as you all fill in this short poll, I will just start a short introduction of myself. Good evening. My name is Denise Woltering Vargas, and I manage educational and community programs at Tulane University's Stone Center for Latin American Studies, located here in New Orleans, Louisiana, the home of Mardi Gras. And it's always an exciting time of the year here when we get to the opportunity to celebrate this unique tradition shared by so many around the world. We get to learn more about our shared history across the Americas. We focus this evening on Panama with an exploration of the traditions and music of the Panamanian Carnival. The Stone Center is focused this year on Panama as we plan to bring 2 groups to the country this summer. Tulane is bringing undergraduate students and K-12 educators for a Summer Teacher Institute. If anyone is interested in learning more about these programs, I will drop the website. It's stonecenter.tulane.edu. Let me just get my chat up and check us out on the website, and you can learn more about our programs. Tonight's presentation is co-sponsored by the Ciudad del Saber and the Centro de Investigaciones Históricas, Antropológicas y Culturales. Our presenter this evening is an ethnomusicologist from Panama, Dr. Samuel Robles. He is a composer, a conductor, an educator, and a writer. His music has been performed and recorded by orchestras, chamber groups, and by soloists around the world. He has conducted orchestras in North, Central, and South America, working with young musicians and programs for social development through music. Dr. Robles is also a professor of music at the University of Panama. He is a pianist and accordionist for Los Guayas, and his expertise on this subject is extensive. So I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Samuel Robles, who will share with us the traditions and music of Carnival in Panama.
Thank you very much, Denise. I'm very, very excited to be here with all of you, sharing a little bit of not only my research, but my culture. And it's funny how we are a very small country, but because we have always been at the center geographically of the whole continent between North America and South America, we have always had enormous influence from all over the world. So Carnival is one of those traditions where this is especially manifest. But usually we forget, because of the fact that we're always concerned about Panama as a place of transit, we tend to forget that Panama is also a place where culture is born and where things originate, you know. So today we're going to talk just a little bit about that. And I would like to thank the Stone Center and Tulane University for organizing this talk and for allowing us to bring this message and this information to all of you. I would also like to thank Ciudad del Saber for co-hosting, and also my institution, the CIHAC, which is a fairly recently founded Center for Research in Social Sciences and the Humanities, the study of the past. So let's start with this story. This is a story of transit. It's a story of how a very small place can be the boiling ground for so much information and so many different traditions from all over the place, and how all of those traditions can combine very harmonically because they are influenced not only coming from above, from outside, but also from the grassroots up. And it is in that meeting place where most of the things that we consider Panamanian, which is something of a slippery slope. You know, what is Panamanian and what isn't? This is a very young country, only independent fully since 1903, and even then, you know, with a grain of salt. But also, this is a story of how this national identity is being continuously forged and reimagined through these traditions. When we think about the things that are Panamanian, the things that join us, everyone together, everyone that lives in this territory, if you make an open poll, you're going to get all sorts of different things, you know. So what is it that makes us Panamanian? And I can tell you that it wasn't the same in 1903 as it is now, more than 100 years after that event. And how that changes is a process that we are continuously challenged by, and that we continuously study from all of our diverse disciplines in the social sciences. But most of all, it is a story of love, because in spite of how these traditions came to be, in spite of you know, where this part of the tradition comes from, or that feature from the music comes from, they exist and they are transmitted with care, with love and passion from one generation to the next. And ultimately, all our traditions, including Carnival, are part of that story of love that is the forging of a national identity. Today, I am going to focus, because of the fact that we only have 45 minutes and because this country is so diverse, I am going to focus on perhaps what is the most famous of all carnivals in Panama, the carnival that is celebrated in the city of Las Tablas. It's a very old city in the province of Azuero. And if you look at the map of Panama, Azuero is that big peninsula that's in the south. And what you will see in the park during a night of Carnival is what you have on your screen right now. It's a queen with a hugely ornate costume, and it's all going to be tied up with a story behind it. And this story is going to be part of a chain of stories that are woven through all the 5 days of celebration. And this is going to be also part of a narrative that is being told throughout the years. So there's a lot of luxury involved in this, and there's a lot of production. There is, of course, a lot of economic boost that the city and its inhabitants receive because of Carnival, because of all the production that goes on, but also because of tourism, because the place is flooded with tourists from within the country and from abroad. So I'm going to focus on that, but before I get to that, I'm going to go from large to small and just turn in that lens and do a very quick history of the Carnival in Panama, in the region, and then talk specifically about the music that you will hear if you go to Las Tablas for a Carnival. I know that I don't have to tell many of you, what Carnival is, but this is, of course, a tradition that if we just look at Carnival, what Carnival is now, in many places, you kind of forget that it is actually a Catholic thing, because you'll see people going crazy and people letting out. And the fact of the matter is that for Catholics, Carnival is a sort of escape valve, because before you go into the penitential period of Lent, 40 days before Holy Week. So what happens in many places is that certain restraint that society has throughout the year is abandoned during the Carnival. So this is the Catholic rationale for Carnival. And some people, most people perhaps agree that the origin for the word carnival comes from this phrase carnem levare. This is not something that is entirely proven, but there is a tradition in Lent for Roman Catholicism where you actually fast during Lent as a penitential manifestation. So what you do is you don't eat meat during this whole time. So carnem is meat, levare is to lift that from your life. And it is a symbol of the things that you are sacrificing. You know, Catholic religion is all about what you give. You know, there's a sacrifice beforehand. So what you do is, you know, you celebrate before this ritual comes in. But the history of Carnival is more complex than that, because in spite of the fact that it has the roots in early Christianity, it also has deeper roots within Roman celebrations. And some of those traditions that you would find in Roman celebrations, like the Saturnalia celebrations, for example, some of those features you find in the early carnivals, even here in Panama. For example, one of those things is role reversal. In the Saturnalia celebrations, you would have for a day or two, you have the masters becoming the slaves and the slaves becoming the masters. So the masters are serving the slaves for a day and doing a play of teams. You know, there's always this dichotomy that something comes in pairs, that everything comes in pairs. So this is, yes, a festival of Catholic origin, or maybe I should say para-Catholic, because this is of course not officially sanctioned as a Catholic celebration, but that also has deep roots between, you know, within European lore. And then how does Carnival gets to the Caribbean is a fairly simple story if you say, oh yeah, because the Europeans came here and so on. But nothing is really simple in the Caribbean. Everything is very complex because there are several waves of migrations that happen, you know, from the time that the first European settlers come to the Caribbean until now. So sometimes the influence comes from the East, sometimes it comes back there. And this sort of circular influence that happens throughout the Atlantic, you can see cultural features that emerge in the Caribbean, then going back to the western coast of Africa. In Benin, for example, you start hearing Afro-Cuban music that was developed in the Caribbean. You start hearing it influence music that is now being produced in Africa. So influence goes both ways. And Carnival, of course, is one of those things that could not stay in Europe. It had to travel, right? Everybody in countries like Italy, Spain, and especially France, they love their Carnival. And Carnival makes it to the Caribbean primarily because of the French. And one of the places where French found it especially liberating to celebrate Carnival was in Trinidad, because it wasn't governed by the French, and they didn't have all of the, you know, they had a lot more freedom under the early Spanish settlers in the islands to celebrate this feast. So Carnival in Trinidad became, after that, when the English took over, a lot of free Black populations that were there beforehand when the Spanish came there, that also traveled, that were cruised in ships that then stayed there. All of this made Carnival a celebration that was very democratic. It was it was practiced throughout all the layers of society, and it was kind of a great equalizer. And the Trinidad is the model for what happened in many places. You see the same thing happening then in Cuba, you see it happening in Salvador, in Brazil, you see it happening in many places in Central America, Veracruz in Mexico, and Panama. When I say the Caribbean, I mean all the Caribbean, so all the coasts as well. You know, the Veracruz is much as part of the Caribbean as Cuba is, for example. And you see that communication, you see that sharing of cultural elements. And of course, Carnival makes it to Panama. Panama is a country with a very complex history that I will not get into today. Suffice it to say, for our purposes, that Panama has had a lot of influence since the 19th century from the United States and from France. We of course know that Panama had been under Spanish control until 1821, and then passed on to Colombia, to the Republic of Colombia. And during this Colombian period, you know, we had a lot of foreign influence. We had the construction of the railroad. We have the first large attempt of building the canal by the French. And then it was finally at the beginning of the 20th century when the US started building the canal. But the US was already here before that in the 1850s because of the railroad. So the Carnival was always here. The Carnival was here since the times of the Spanish, and we have very little information, very little record of what happened in the Carnival before the late 1800s. But when we see what what information we do have, we see carnivals that has this dichotomy, has the role reversal, where you would get people from the so-called elite, engaging in activities that weren't their normal activities, going to places that to dances where they weren't supposed to go socially or whatever. And this all happened during that period before Lent. When they did go over there, historian Guillermo Andreve tells us that you would have people from outside of the city walls throw water at them and throw indigo at them and throw flour after they throw water. And then they would also kidnap, and demand a ransom for the people that they captured. And these games were framed in things like, the Pirates of Morgan against the defenders of old Panama City, and the Indians against the Spanish, and the Maroons against the Spanish. There was always this dichotomy. So okay, I'm going to bring you hostage, and then somebody's going to have to pay a ransom, and the ransom were just a few pennies. And then that money was used to pay for carnival celebrations, for dances, for musicians that were held in public spaces, like open plazas and the very distinctly colorful jardines that we call gardens, but they're actually dance halls where the celebrations would take place. And again, just like at the beginning of Caribbean Carnival in Trinidad, and just like Carnival in Venice, and just like the pagan celebrations in the Roman Empire and before that, Carnival in Panama was an opportunity for the social barriers, the social distinctions to sort of blur, and people celebrated across the social layers, which is a very interesting thing, and it doesn't continue exactly that way afterwards, when the Carnival becomes an official celebration after the country's independence. When this happens in 1910, carnivals become extremely organized and bureaucratic. We have a board that handles the carnivals, and this board is formed, of course, by people from the elite. And now they are looking for ways of making Carnival leverage their businesses and show their daughters to society, because marriage still was a very important thing socially, commercially by this time. And you will see that there were competitions to see which queen would be selected. And queens become a very important part of the Panamanian carnival tradition. This is something that perhaps is a bit different than in other places, the obsession that we have in Panama with our carnival queens. And these queens are backed up by a group of people, and this group of people is usually called a comparsa, and then that turns into tuna. Tuna is a word that comes from Spain. It comes from southern Spain, where most of the people, most of the Spaniards that came to America, to the Americas, were from. So we get a lot of our words from them. And again, you have this dichotomy, these teams playing against one another, one queen against the other queen. And in the first carnivals, it was the red queen against the blue queen. And you would have them be dressed in this ornate regalia, which, you know, at this time, it looked like British queens, you know, with this crown that had, you know, very ornate filigree and jewelry. And all of these women that were crowned queens were from families of the elite. It was a very important thing to be named queen because it sort of allowed you to participate publicly in many events, many important events where the society would gather. So Carnival quickly became, in the first years of the Republic, into something of an elite celebration, where they would have an organized parade, like you see in this picture. This picture is from 1915. You see that it's all very orderly and organized. Well, outside the city walls, it wasn't happening that way. People kept celebrating the carnivals the same way they used to. So from, you know, we came here to talk about music. So now is when the music starts. And the first thing, you know, I'm going to just do a brief survey of, you know, the music that was happening in Panama at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, that allowed for the music that we're going to listen to later to occur. What you would hear in Panama in the 19th century, the same as you would in all of Latin America and the Caribbean, if you went to a dance, was a set of European dances. You would have polkas, you would have mazurkas, you would have contra dances framed by the waltz. The waltz, since, you know, the second third of the 19th century, was the most widely performed dance music. And Panama was no exception, and it was very, very, very popular. But from this side of music production, we have a lot of influence from the Cuban Danson, and this is extremely important. I've talked about this in other platforms. The Danson held a stronghold on Panamanian taste for about maybe 40 or 50 years, and this shaped how we listen to music. We shaped how our popular music orchestras form, the kind of melodic patterns that we favored, and when it met the local cumbia, it turned into a very peculiar style of music that is still what we dance to here in Panama. And tamborito is a tradition where a woman is a soloist, and she sings in call and response against a chorus of the rest of the community women, and they are accompanied by drums, only drums. This is a very ancient tradition that, you know, we find mentioned in, you know, documents in the Archivo de Indias from the 18th century. We see correspondence even involving the king, asking about, you know, what's happening with this music, with this singing, with this dancing, and all the authorities are always in favor of allowing it because it kept the population at bay and it kept them happy and entertained. So for us, you know, this tradition is tamborito. In other places, in Colombia, in Cuba, it takes on different names, but it's basically the singing of a solo verse that is then improvised against the repetition of that same verse. And I'm going to play for you just a little bit of how all of that sounds. And I'm going to start with Danson, just so that you can get an idea of what kind of danzons you would hear at the beginning of the century in Panama. This is a Panamanian danzon, and it sounds very Cuban, right? You hear it, oh, it's Cuba. But it's a Panamanian danzon recorded by a Colombian orchestra in New York. And it's called El Duque del Happyland, and Happyland was one of those jardines where people went to dance. So you have a big repertoire of danzones that come from Panama, and they are in the minds of people, and danzón is one of the favorite carnival music of the first carnivals in Panama. And then I'm going to play for you just the very beginning of two tamboritos, so that you can hear one tamborito in duple meter and one tamborito in triple meter, because this is going to be relevant later. Okay, so we'll start with this one. This one in particular is you know, about unrequited love, but the tamborito in Panama has always been a platform for all kinds of subjects, and this includes political subjects. There are tamboritos about the canal being built. There are tamboritos against slavery. There are tamboritos supporting political candidates. And there are tamboritos when the first airplanes came to Panama, because it was something, you know, a very, I imagine, shocking to see, you know, this machine in the air. And so there are tamboritos about airplanes. So tamboritos can be about any topic. And you find them a lot about love. You find them a lot about, you know, having double meanings, double entendre. So it's a platform that's very flexible, and we'll see how that becomes important in our conversation about carnival music. This one is in triple meter, and it has the title of the talk today. Si se quema el monte, if the bush burns, let it burn, you know? So this is Lucy Jaén, by the way, who's singing. She was one of the most revered tamborito singers in Panama.
Que se queme el monte, déjalo quemar, que la mala hierba vuelve a retoñar. Que se queme el monte, déjalo quemar, que la mala hierba vuelve a retoñar.
So if the bush burns, let it burn. Because, you know, the wheat will just grow back again. So this one is just about, you know, normal field work. But then this was turned later into carnival music, setting one part of the town against another. And, you know, I'm going to show you how that happened later. When I mentioned cumbia, I'm talking about this very peculiar Panamanian cumbia that is very much influenced by danzón, and it eventually turns into something like this. Like many danzones, it has a section in the major key with open phrases, open shorter phrases toward the end. This is a song from 1927, recorded in the early 50s. So it's pretty, the closest you can find, the closest recording you can find to what the original might have sounded like a little bit originally performed on the violin. So when I say cumbia, that's what I mean. And we're going to hear a little modern one, more modern one in a little bit. So that is basically the music that was here in Panama before the big organized celebration Carnival happened in Las Tablas. And how did it get to Las Tablas? Well, this is a very small country. And even though we are so small, it was not very easy to get around by land. So people travel by sea. And if you go from Panama City to Las Tablas by sea, it's a lot easier and a lot quicker than if you try to, go on horseback through the continental divide and all of those rivers that don't have any bridges. I'm talking, of course, about in the 20s. And the Carnival gets there by boat. It gets there by the sea, by the water. It's very important because we also in Panama tend to forget that we were a country that was communicated by water and whose livelihood, whose entire economy was indebted to the water. Today, we only think about the Panama Canal as being our water symbol, but every coast in Panama used to be a very important and bustling, brilliant town with a lot of energy. And this is what happened in Las Tablas. Las Tablas is very close to the ocean, and Las Tablas has now 3 or 4 ports that service it. But in that time, it was just the one port, the port of Mensabe. And this is how a lot of these traditions came in. A lot of the danson, a lot of the African music that came to Azuero came through the sea, through these little ports all across the eastern seaboard of that peninsula. And the music that we hear in Las Tablas is brass music. You're going to hear it in a little while. Funny story of how that started. This guy that you see there, Arturo Dubarry, the son of a French immigrant, he was the director of our main ceremonial band in the 19th century. And they told him, this board told him, you need to have the band play for carnivals. And he says, the band is not for that. The band is for ceremonial occasions. The band is for the burials of dignitaries. The band is not for dances. So I'm not going to do that. They said, okay, so you're fired. And they hired musicians separately. And since they didn't have any name to call them, they called them a very Spanish word that comes from the south of Spain also, the murga. So the music of the carnivals in early Panama was performed by a pygmy group of musicians, and Arturo Dubarry was the unwitting creator of the Panamanian murga, which is now a symbol of Panamanian identity, especially Azuero identity. Of course, not everybody is always in favor of everything. This is Manuela Fessarate, one of the fountainheads of the preservation of Panamanian traditions. And he was always against brass. He was always against foreign influences, what he calls foreign influences, which is a very blurry line in Panama. And he always opposed this kind of celebrations because he thought that it would contradict tradition and it would bury it. But the fact of the matter is that tradition has remained in spite of the fact that new instruments have come to play a role. What you would hear at first when carnivals began to be a big thing in Azuero, which is roughly around the 1930s. So we are just mixing in that period, is tamborito. No, the tamborito that you heard with Lucy Jaén, and you would start hearing tamboritos not only about all the topics that I mentioned, but also, you know, picking a fight. Picking a fight with whom and why? Well, this is hazy for our historiography because we don't know exactly when things originated, but tradition tells us, and tradition is always important. Tradition tells us that when the Spanish, you know, before the Spanish founded the actual city of Las Tablas, there were two wayside shrines, you know, roadside shrines that were on opposing sides of this main road. And these two shrines exist today, you know, in the same place where they were there when the Spanish founded them. And one of them is the main church of Las Tablas that houses the image of Saint Liberata, which is a Catholic martyr revered in this town. So the first rivalry, according to tradition, began with those two wayside shrines. You know, my celebration is going to be better. My patron saint date is going to be better. My float, where the image of the saint is going to go on procession, is going to be better. The musicians are going to be better. And of course, I'm going to sing about how my is better. You know? So this is how tradition holds that the rivalry began. And in the 1930s is when you start getting the dichotomy between the two streets or the two calles, calle arriba and calle abajo, up street and down street. And right now, if you go to Las Tablas, there isn't a geographical line. There isn't like one single line where you go from calle arriba to calle abajo geographically. There are places that are symbolic of the tradition of that street, of that group of people. For example, the neighborhood of Punta Fogón is very emblematic for calle abajo. But calle abajo is carried in the blood. It's not carried, geographically. And it's carried through maternal blood. So it's also a matriarchal celebration. If you are the son of a calle arriba father and a calle abajo mother, you are calle abajo, right? And it doesn't matter if you go live in the house of someone who is closer to the emblematic geographical calle arriba, you are calle abajo, and that is a calle abajo house. So it's something that goes within, it's something that goes in the blood. So you start hearing music that supports one or the other street. So again, here is the wonderful Lucy Jaén in one of those tamboritos that talk about the division of the streets.
Calle abajo se puso brava y eso es lo que a mí me gusta, y si no le gusta, no le gusta, y eso a mí no me disgusta. Calle abajo se puso brava y eso es lo que a mí me gusta. Calle abajo se puso brava y eso es lo que a mí me gusta. Calle abajo se puso brava y eso es lo que a mí me gusta.
Calle abajo is angry, and this is what I like. So she improvises on that topic while the others repeat that same verse. And of course, Lucy Jaén is very much calle arriba. The topic of how the other street is angry is the first who gets angry loses, kind of the thing. It becomes a trope in the music of Las Tablas Carnival. Now, if you have this group, which is formed by just one woman, then the chorus of all other participating women, and 3 membranophone drums. You'll hear it from here to maybe half a block. And if there's a lot of people, you won't hear very much beyond that. So very soon as Carnival celebrations became more popular, and in the 1950s became organized with properly registered organizations leading each one of the streets, and then reigns started with all the queens and the regalia and the coronation ceremonies and all of that, then you needed louder music, right? And it's very impractical to go around with these drums and connected to speakers, because this is actually a procession. When you are doing this, you are on the move. There is no static carnival. The carnival is always a parade. And this is also something that comes from a European tradition. European tradition is all about parades. There's something we'll celebrate with a parade. There is a funeral, there is a funeral procession. And there is a saint, we have to do a procession. And there's a baptism, we have to do a procession inside the church. So the translation is a very important thing for our culture imbued with strong Spanish tradition. So what we needed was something to power this up. And Arturo Dubarry unwittingly gave them the answer by asking the Junta de Carnaval, the Carnival board, to just hire some musicians, but the band is not going to do that. So this brass incursions in the tamborito is what brought up the murga. And the murga is nothing but tamboritos on some kind of very strong energy drink, played on European brass and percussion instruments that are going to be louder. The size of the murga, which is not only the kind of music, but also the group that plays it, depends on the size of the people who are hearing. And since Las Tablas is a very popular carnival destination and thousands upon thousands of people flood the park, the Calle Arriba and Calle Abajo murgas are extremely large. They are formed by maybe 30, 40 people. They play nonstop every morning and every night during 5 days. They also play in several events before that so that people learn the music, learn the words, and they can sing along when the brass is playing. But what you will hear in the murgas is the same thing that you will hear in the tamboritos. It's call and response. There is a space for the verse and there is a space for the large chorus. Where only soloists would sing, you have the saxophones. And where there is the community chorus joining in, then you have the trumpets and the trombones, okay? All through a very energetic percussion section. And the words that they sing are, some of them are very old. They come from the 1950s, passed from generation to generation, and others are done every year. And the reason they are done every year is so that they can pick personally, very personally, sometimes in manners that wouldn't be okay in any other context, personally against the other queen. And they can be very, very mean. I'm not going to play any of the really mean stuff, but trust me, some of them are very, very racy. So if you bear with me just a little bit, I am going to play for you now what are called the anthems of each of these streets. And I am going to, this is a slippery slope for me. I don't want to be on anybody's tonada next year. I'm going to do it alphabetically. And since abajo comes before arriba alphabetically, I'm playing Calle Abajo's hymno first. And also because my godmother is from Calle Abajo, and if I don't do this, she wouldn't forgive me. So this is the anthem of Calle Abajo. And you will hear the same idea of the tamborito, but with this extreme energy, brass instruments over European percussion in a very, very, very energetic presentation. These are recordings that are done so that people learn the music. So you will actually get to hear the words. If you are in the celebration, it's very hard to hear anything but, you know, just the big noise.
Yo vengo del Canadá a bailar los carnavales.
I'm gonna jump a little bit.
Que viva, viva las tablas. Que viva la calle abajo. Que viva la calle abajo. Que viva la calle abajo.
So it goes on for a while. It has some breaks, some changes. This is the Calle Arriba anthem.
Sale calle arriba, qué belleza. Sale parrandeando como no.
Qué emoción salir de la calle Bolívar, esto es incomparable.
La pobre calle abajo se endurece, porque sabe que el pueblo la despreció.
Calle abajo despreciada hoy y siempre.
Calle Abajo, despreciada hoy. Those are, you know, strong things, but this is nothing compared to what the actual music that comes out every year. Those are called the tonadas, and people actually go to rehearsal sessions, you know, where they do, you know, a traditional killing of a cow, and the community comes together. The murga is there, and they're playing, and they pass on the lyrics, and everybody learns it. And I have some music here from the 2015 carnivals, and some are, you know, okay, they're just speaking good things about their own queen, and some are a little bit more out there. Here. So they're saying their queen is pretty, and you know, this neighborhood has pretty women, and you know, it's important for them. But they're also calling the other ones cockroaches.
¿Cómo nos odian ellas? Trae arriba tu cara, tambores de fantasía. Ella quiere la blanca, caliente la colora.
Okay, arriba, you are cockroaches. That's why you are going to be punished. You have the really clear ones, and you have the really black ones. It's terrible stuff, but it's all in good fun. Now, Calle Arriba also has their own tonadas. Of course, they're not gonna stay there. It's all a fight. It's all a confrontation. So they have their own way of getting back at Calle Abajo. They steal, and nothing happens. So this is just bringing a current event that's happening, that's in the news, that's in relation to somebody that belongs to that street, and they are using it in order to go against the other street. And one last one here. I apologize ahead of time. This is talking about a mist, from a beauty contest from the other street. You have the body of a sail, and you know that the wind takes away. You were taken to this competition. There was, you didn't win, nothing happened. You were there only just for show. So you can see that this confrontation can get very, very dirty sometimes. These are some of the most clean ones, I suppose. But it's all in part of this celebration that happens during this time. The rivalry, is kept throughout the year, but really it only is enforced, if you want to put it some way, through the music during this period of carnivals. And as you can see in this image from the park, there are thousands of people there. They are being thrown water, and the murga is on top of all of that, sounding, and everybody who knows this music is singing it, and it's 5 days, of complete and utter disdain for one's health, and just for the sake of having fun. People save the entire year to rent a house in Las Tablas, to get some place to stay, a backyard where I can put a tent. It has, of course, its bad side, like every cultural manifestation, but the tradition is very beautiful. The tamborito keeps going on, keep being a very important part of the celebrations, and young people are always eager to learn about it. Young people are always eager to learn to build these instruments and play them, and it's in the end something that is very, very beautiful. And all the pickings and all the angriness and all the one side against the other is quickly forgotten after the celebrations. These passed to other towns around Las Tablas and quickly spread throughout the country. The idea of the two streets, in some places like Pedací, where this picture was taken, it's a smaller town, and carnivals are more of a family affair. You do have the murga, but in the afternoons you have the tamborito, and everything is in a smaller scale. And it's kind of like you would imagine carnivals were, how carnivals were at the beginning of the times. And now Las Tablas is a sort of Panamanian Rio de Janeiro, where you have all these people coming in, and it's no longer something that looks anything like tradition, but you can't tell that to someone who lives it and lives for this tradition, something that is culturally very powerful and almost defining of the identity of Azuero. So Carnival in Panama is one of the most distinctive manifestations of this place where all these cultures meet. It is also a manifestation of how Panamanians are continuously transforming it, allowing new influences to come in, holding on to others in order to redefine constantly what it is to be a Panamanian through these traditions like Carnival, like the tamborito. But ultimately, like I said, even though there's a lot of fighting, there is a lot of love, because the families who live this, and I can tell you from the people I know that are from Las Tablas, this is something that is handled with a lot of love, a lot of care, and people are always really extremely proud of saying that they are Calle Arriba, they are Calle Abajo, that my daughter, my niece was a queen. So it's always something that is done with a lot of love, with a lot of smiles, and all the battering that happens through the music, through this platform of cross-Atlantic influences is forgotten right after the parade is over and it's all done in extreme fun. So I thank you for your attention. I know I went just a little bit.
This was so amazing. I just know we have so many questions. So I mean, the music was so interesting, so fascinating. I would love to open it up if you want to unmute yourself or ask a question in chat. And Dr. Robles can get to it. I have a question.
Yes.
You had mentioned right before the presentation the status of Carnival today. So what is Panama doing with Carnival this year?
Yeah, for last year and this year, because the carnivals in 2020 were before the lockdown. So again, this year, we are not officially having carnivals. That means that a large sector of the towns where Carnival is celebrated more deeply are again hurt because of this, because there's a huge economy that goes into this. Families rent their houses, they rent out their backyards, they put up food stands. Some people take care of actually designing and building all these elaborate costumes that happen throughout the celebration. It's an industry that's extremely been battered by the pandemic. But of course, it's what we need to do. You know, there's no question that if we allow it, then it can be very bad for our very weak health system to manage. And of course, I think it has been proven that there is no health system that is strong enough to handle something like what we went through. So we don't want any more of that. So everybody received this news like, you know, okay, sure. You know, we all knew that this was going to happen. So this is how it's being handled. But if you go to a house of someone from Calle Abajo or Calle Arriba in Las Tablas, I can assure you that there's going to be celebration during those days. And I can assure you there's a queen, and you know, all of those things keep happening because there's nothing quite more important than this for a lot of people. So it's a beautiful tradition, and it's a shame that we cannot have it, but there's absolutely no way of controlling people if we say, let's do it, you know.
Yeah, Shirley has a question about foods associated with Carnival in Panama.
Yes, well, the foods, and the food in Carnival is the same food as the rest of the year, but more. So the food is just like our music in Panama. It has influences from all over the place, even from Indian food, and we have a lot of French influence. There are things in Panama, there are pastries in Panama that have Spanish names that are French. For example, if you know what a palmier is in French pastry, we call that an ear, oreja. And for us, there is nothing more Panamanian than an oreja. It looks like a palm leaf, but it also looks like an ear. So we call it an ear. And we also have influence from China, because we had Chinese migrant workers for the railroad, and then they stayed here. Our food is very spicy because it's very Caribbean, and there's a lot of African influence from there, Afro-Caribbean influence in our music. Sorry, first I had it in our food. So yes, the food is the same. We have empanadas, we have carimañolas, which is sort of like an empanada, but cylindrical and made of yuca instead of corn or flour. And also, you know, with beef filling. It's delicious. That's my favorite thing in the world. And also the sancocho, which is the traditional soup. Very important because it's what you have in the morning after a big hangover.
So we have a king cake here in New Orleans, and I know rosca de reyes is something eaten around Carnival. Is there some sort of cake? Do you guys have a rosca de reyes for a Carnival?
We don't have a rosca de reyes here. We don't celebrate Reyes as much as other places. We are more a Christmas people. But a lot of places celebrate Reyes more than they do Christmas, and that's when they exchange presents. And in Veracruz, for example, they do have that, and it's also tied to a Catholic tradition somehow. And I don't know the history enough to tell you more about it, but I know that at least in Veracruz, it is part of the Carnival / Catholic celebrations, Lent celebrations. But in Panama, we don't have a Rosca de Reyes like that.
Are there any other questions? I know I got a comment from a teacher joining us this evening saying that she's hoping to use some of this in her class. Do you have a playlist or a list of resources that that we could use so that this video will be archived and I can share the link, but I'm wondering if you have a list of songs that people could access.
Yes, I made 2 playlists for this, one on Spotify and one on SoundCloud. Let me see if I can just quickly share those in the chat so that you can have access to them. Okay. So that's the Spotify one. And I think that I made this list private. Let me see if I can quickly open it. This is my first time using SoundCloud, so I don't know exactly how to change it. But if you go to SoundCloud and you put Calle Arriba or Calle Abajo, you'll get all the music that I played today. And you can hear all the more risque ones that I didn't play out of respect for everybody. They are a lot of fun, but you need to be in a special mindset in order to call it fun. And not being from there, I understand that it touches on a lot of sensitivity. So be careful if you're going through some of those. You're going to find lyrics that can be very offensive. We have some questions here.
Manuel Perez.
Okay. Yes. Carnival in the question is about Carnavalito in Colón and Carnival in Las Tablas. Carnavalito is a celebration different from Carnival. It happens on a different date, and it's sort of a small mirror of what the actual celebration is. So in Colón, carnivals are a bit different. Carnivals in Colón, which is where I grew up until I was 3 years old. Well, that's not much growing up really, but I did go back for carnivals to Colón quite a bit. It's more like carnivals used to be at the beginning of the century in Panama. You have a parade, you have comparsas. The comparsas grew to not only support a queen, a main queen of the carnival, but also to support a business. A business-sponsored comparsa or a neighborhood. So this neighborhood, this street, this block has its own comparsa, and they have their own special percussion patterns that they play, and their special music that they play, and each one wants to outdo the other ones, and there's this competition across the comparsas, and there's dances at night in dance halls. The population in Colón, if you go to Colón and you go to Las Tablas, you can easily think that they are different countries, and the food is different. The music that you hear in the street is different. Is a lot more like what you would hear in the carnival in Uruguay, for example. It's very high energy percussion being played by the community, not by a group in a car. It's a lot more participative. And you have those street games. You have the street games of the devils and the angels running through the streets, and the devils have like little makeshift whips. And if you're not careful, you can get hit by one of those, and they chase you around. It's kind of unnerving for a 5-year-old, as I remember. But it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's different kind of fun than in Las Tablas. It's different traditions. It's much more apparently Caribbean than the carnival in Las Tablas is.
There was one other question right above it. A student doing a report on Panamanian handicrafts. What do you think is the importance of handicrafts in the Panamanian Carnival?
Okay, it depends on what will fall into that that category. What usually the first thing that usually comes to mind when we think about handicrafts, the artifacts in Panama, is Corpus Christi, the Corpus Christi celebrations. That is where you have the really impressive devil masks that they wear in the game of the angels against the devils. That is where you have all the dresses that go on with the mystery plays that accompany the celebrations in Corpus Christi. These are most famous in a town called Los Santos, which is even older than Las Tablas, and it's about 45 minutes drive north of Las Tablas. In Carnival, what you have more of is people who are designing the costumes for the queens. You have more people offering food, offering very quick and greasy fried food on the streets. You have musicians working overtime. I had students that when Carnival season came, you would never see them on a rehearsal because they were, making all the money that they couldn't make the rest of the year. So a lot of the people that are performing these services for the entertainment, megalo feast that is Carnival are working overtime. You don't see a lot of people selling handcrafts. You see that more on the other summer celebrations like the Azuero Fair, which happens on a different date. You see it in Festival de la Mejorana, which happens in September. This is the most important festival for deep-rooted traditions. This was created actually by Manuela Fessarate, when I show you that was against all the brass and all the foreign influence. He created this festival along with members of the community in order to protect those traditions. And this is where you find a lot more of that, a lot of more of the handicrafts and people building the instruments and competition of the instrument itself and playing the instrument. So this is more something that you would find in other celebrations where actually handicrafts are in no danger of being destroyed by all the, the celebration and the bumping and the water and everything.
Well, we are at overtime, so I don't want to take up any more of everyone's evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Robles. Thank you to the Ciudad del Saber and CIHAC. Thanks for joining us and happy Carnival.
Thank you. Happy Carnival.